Hi friends. Well, I'm back again to see about maybe finishing up on science. I don't know if I'll ever finish up on it. I mentioned before the love and respect and excitement in this heart over science. To me, it's truth with a capital T. It's the search for truth. And I know that there are more and more great scientists that are speaking up. There have been ones that spoke up and told truths that the powers that be, or the powers that were, didn't want out, and they lost their life for it, or they were threatened or beat up, or this is a very common thing, and that's a shame. That's something's bad wrong, as they say, when it isn't considered appropriate. The government doesn't consider it appropriate to give us truth. So we begin to feel more like mushrooms, grown in the dark. And the critical factor is perception, isn't it? Something I argue for a lot or promote is something I'm calling having a flexible perspective. Every man's truth is his own. And just because you see things one way, that doesn't have anything to do with your neighbor or your brother or the man on the other side of the globe from you, or woman. Everyone's entitled to see things their own way. Science is an attempt to get together, establish some common measurements, and do some common work and have standards set in such a way that it's useful around the world. And, there are a lot of successes there. There's a lot of wonderful research. Much of it underfunded. Always follow the money. So we're talking about different perspectives on things. Frankly, that's what I see a person, a being, as one individual facet in the overall faceted gem that is source. And so a person is an angle of view on what is. A being, any kind of being, including a blade of grass. Everything is conscious. I don't care what we're told. Everything is conscious, and you can work it out for yourself. I can't do your work for you, but I can share with you what I have found, and maybe it'll spark some imagination and some ideas, and other people will go off and check things out and make videos on what they have found. Let's have a community conversation. That's what we're doing with the internet. It's like our local chat room, for planet Earth. Why not? We're all brethren. Okay, so we talk about these different angles of view, different perspectives, different beliefs. Perspective is at the heart of all of it, and it's critically important. Do you know, for instance, that your eyes natively, just like a camera lens, see things upside down? The brain flips things so that they're right side up. For a while I was a psychology major in university, and so I learned about experiments that were done where I think it was college student volunteers participated, and they were given glasses to put on and wear all the time, I think, except for when they slept, that made things upside down. And so each one of them had to have a helper assigned to help them navigate in their upside down world. Now, I don't remember any of the particular details of the experiment. I remember the bottom line was, after a period of time, all of a sudden the brain flipped all of the upside downness and made it right side up. So even though they had their upside down glasses on, they were seeing right side up. And then, of course, once they took those glasses off, they were seeing upside down again. So, perception. What is perception? And then, of course, we've got the observer effect. Is it really when we look at something that it collapses the wave into a particle? I don't know. But it pays to not be so arrogant about our ideas of how things are and how things should be and so on. And when people say, show it to me, prove it to me, don't come knocking here. I'm just in a different space, and you have to prove things for yourself. It's not anybody else's responsibility to figure things out for you. We can all join in the conversation. It is your responsibility to put your reality together, to choose your own beliefs. And there's no excuse, what with the internet and not being able to go and do a lot of research on your own. Okay, that being said, I'm going to share with you this other journal, and we'll see where it goes when I get to the end. It's got a favorite short, less than an hour, close to an hour, presentation by Rupert Sheldrake. And it's got, he's got a book that in the West is called Science Set Free in the USA, and I believe it's called The Science Delusion in Europe. So I found a generous preview of the book where you can read quite a good chunk of it. It's very exciting. It's a wonderful book. He takes he's a scientist, and he takes 10 major aspects of science and slices and dices them in such a way that you realize their assumptions. I enjoyed watching it. It's called Beyond Reason. It's an hour-and-a-half video. I've got a Bruce Lipton presentation. I think it's really good. It's an intro to Fractal, Evolution. I hope that you will watch it. It's got some good stuff. I know Bruce tends to repeat himself somewhat. I found this one refreshing. And finally, if there are any Nassim Haramein lovers out there, I'm among you. I don't believe everything the man says. There's not a being walking the earth or that ever has that I believe everything they've said. However, I love him. I love his adventurous approach to physics and to science, and it's visionary. And so, believe it or not, this is the complete Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library presentation. It's 6 hours, 52 minutes, 21 seconds. Put your feet up, chill out, and enjoy. Here we go. Oh, this is written, it's from 2/1 of this year, 2013. It's the first one of the day, and the Mayan day was 7 wind. So right in the middle of the Tracina. This is another experiment. It seems to have a lot of mind to it, but it's coming from heart, so here goes. If we go back into recent history, and I'll say the last couple of thousand years or so, we precede the birth of what we today call science. Initially, only the clergy and those of noble birth could read, so everyone else looked to them for instruction and truth. With the church firmly in charge of scholarship, we find God given as the answer to so many things, pretty much anything they couldn't explain. As for instance, Newton's laws worked to predict planetary motion only so far. There was a little fudge factor in there. When quizzed about that small imperfection, he is said to have answered that the angels must come down now and then and give their orbits a nudge to keep it all in its proper place. I'm not making fun of the man. I'm illustrating the mindset that we're looking at when we look at these earlier scientists. This sort of answer, even preceding the arrival of Jesus and later the Catholic Church, was quite common. God was looked at as creator, prime mover, and very much in charge of all things. Thus were the sacrifices and prayers made to placate or satisfy such a power as that, and to keep man's noses clean and in line with God's desires, as told by the clergy, of course. Now, to us back then, and we live there, friends, all of your incarnations are now. To us back then, this all made good sense. Angels were relied on a good bit, even to the point of one being assigned to each mortal the guardian angel. And that worked for a good while, but then the intensely curious began developing things such as telescopes and giving them access to even more astute or accurate observations. At this point, things began to clash. When the Earth and planets were seen to go around the sun, instead of the church propounded Earth-centric arrangement, heads would roll. Well, something like that. It didn't matter how excellent the evidence. If anything at all went contrary to church teachings, the discoverer would likely find themselves on the other side in fairly short order. So, we saw the split come between science and religion. Up to that point, they had always marched hand in hand. The science is there to illuminate the handiwork of God. Now, while that sounds a bit strange today, it's really not that long ago that it was the quite accepted way things were considered to work. It was that day's normal. As our maths began to excel, it wasn't long before the flaws in Newton's math that had him calling on angels as the ones supplying the perfection of things were eclipsed. Now the math became able to successfully account for how things worked. God and the angels were given the boot, just seen as not needed to explain things anymore. Now, first of all, that's interesting just on the face of it. It makes me wonder at the separation of God and maths. I'm not arguing for religion here, far from it. Don't have a religious bone in this body. This is still logic at work. Just because something is known such that the how of some motion can be calculated doesn't, to me, take God or source out of it. Do they think source has no intelligence or has no understanding of maths? Do they think because something is regular that God wouldn't be involved? Do they forbid God from having aught to do with anything unless it's done by some magical or mystical operation? Is this God used as the catchphrase or dumping ground for anything not yet understood? And not intentionally, of course, but such that once it's understood and calculated out, God can be dismissed? If it can later be understood, how does that eliminate source? Let's say you've been praying in earnest to be given an understanding of how some particular thing works. You're really fascinated by it, whatever it is. Maybe you're one of the Wright brothers. But you can't quite connect all the dots. Later, through any number of miscellaneous avenues, come the missing pieces to your puzzle. They could have come through a class, a book you found, a radio talk show, a friend, a stranger at lunch, intuition, whatever. Does their method of arrival prevent them from being an answer to your prayers? One that was intentionally sent. Mankind seems quite vague around this sort of thing. It's just not well thought out, or so it seems to me. And with religion having become such a taboo to those involved in holy science, they dare not even consider consciousness, much less divine support for anything. I call that a mess. What is it about maths that they are used to exclude God? Instead, why could it not be that the maths were given an answer to men's prayers to know? And back then it was men. Why could not a universe or a cosmos with a divine creator not be based on maths? I just don't see them as mutually exclusive. Now, admittedly, huge swaths of the way God was conceived of or thought of had to go. It was too spooky and superstitious. This was clearly man's incomplete conception of things and no fault of God or source. So what is it about man's ideas clarifying that shoves God out? Could not that increase in clarity have been delivered by source? People haven't had a clear conception of source, nor have we well understood much of science for very long. I hate to see the baby discarded with the dirty bathwater, God thrown out simply because knowledge increased. Does man think himself the origin of this increase of knowledge? It's fairly arrogant. Why not, along with revising understanding of science, just revise understanding of source? I'm going to take just a second here. For those of you who don't know the origin of it, this throwing out the baby with the bathwater is because the father and the boys would bathe first, and then the mother and the girls, and the baby would bathe last of all in the same water. So by then it was pretty dirty. And, let your imagination put together the rest. Now, please hear me on this. We do not need any sort of religion at all to still have respect for divine intelligence, which can also be seen as all that is, was, or will be. That's not religious. It's simply spiritual. Nor does it undercut science one bit. True science as deeply respecting and seeking out truth, capital T, how things work. I think that in our race to leave behind all of the scriptures and trappings of religion, most particularly the dogma and doctrine of it. We've pitched out the baby or God with the bathwater. Now, we can, in my view, remember, these are my views, I say we can throw out religion just fine, those who want to, and even remain atheistic, yet make room for the concept of source as simply all that is. Everything seen as one whole. There's no need to worship that. No priesthood nor tithes required. I see it as just a more expansive way of looking at things, one that doesn't need to do the duality dance of either or. There's no need to fight or reject the high-level concepts involved. This whole thing of butting heads is so old school. Can we leave it behind? Just because we come to understand something does not take source out of the picture. We can even set aside all of the world's religious scriptures, for maybe they're too tied in with the doctrine and dogma the various faiths promote. All of that can go, and there still can be a place of primacy for source as all that is. Things can be sacred without being religious or dogmatic. Please join me in recognizing how deeply dogmatic many aspects and areas of science are. So much that I've often, half-jokingly, called it a religion in its own right. To lend me solid scientific support for this view, I think I'll link you to some work by Rupert Sheldrake, a well-respected scientist of our day. Source or God can be very scientific indeed. Actually, it can be the penultimate. It can be the very source of science, as well as the home and origin of all truth. If I worship anything, folks, it's truth. And I don't. There's just an intensity of reverence for that which is true. To me, it goes hand in hand with sacredness. I trust that science at least intends to seek out truth, even though it does a bit of a shoddy job in any number of ways. All that is equals truth, actually, as all that is. I'm grateful for the powerful seekers of truth who've incarnated among the ranks of science today. Nassim Haramein, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Peter Russell, Amit Goswami, Michael Talbot, and any number of others are breaking ranks with any and all that does not put truth first. Too much of today's science is hidebound and about protecting position and reputation and funding, with scarce concern over the real pursuit of truth. Science is made a whore, a means to an end. My suggestion is this: let's not only shake out all the old, superstitious, dogmatic aspects of religion, but also science as well. There are many, many assumptions placed within the structure of what science says it knows today. Many things we can measure and count for which we have no explanation at all, just our best guess. Well, let's be honest about that and quit sweeping it under the rug, ignoring it. Great reputations and Nobel Prizes have been built on some pretty shaky structures. Finally, it's most important to follow the money in every aspect of science, and probably everything, if we would stick close to what is true. Much that is noble and beautiful, sacred, has been cheapened in the search for reputation and reward. huge amounts of government money are backing, even fronting such things, it's time to set all the rhetoric aside and opt for clear seeing and to reevaluate real truth to her spot, not reevaluate, re-elevate truth to her spot of honor and respect. For now, money has been made into a god that is not as universally respected or sought as some would like. Religion, the way I see it, was created to control the masses. It didn't do a good job, most of them, the majority of them, of protecting and bringing forward through time the teachings of the initial avatar. Now, I put money in the same category, a powerful means of huge control. These things no longer control us as before once they're seen through. It's time to be seeing, my friends. I call for a worldwide revisioning of just what is meant by science, by truth, by spirituality. God or source is not religious. God is not wealthy. These are just means of control and manipulation, ways of keeping us enslaved. So, just because you can understand something does not take source out of the picture. Furthermore, I'd be careful about claiming to understand much, as history is our guide. No knowledge, no science, or facts long remain steady or stable. Whatever it is, give it about 20 years, and we'll understand how it's not the full answer we once thought it was. Now, how can it be otherwise when the only constant here in 3D is change? It's blooming obvious. I think we're taking ourselves way too seriously, dear friends. It's time and past time to lighten the hell up. We get so invested in our opinions and our beliefs. It's time to step back from all we think we know and take a closer look. Nothing at all is what we think it is. Nothing. Well then, let's withdraw our belief. I trust that in this century, the link between belief and reality will be uncovered. It won't necessarily be totally understood, I don't know. But our beliefs are the structure. They are the architect's blueprints for the creation of our reality. And it's not quite that simple, but then again, yes it is. And so I don't see anything better than working our garden of beliefs and changing the ones we were programmed with and doing some picking and choosing about what we replace them with. When you're trying to shift something, be sure to have something to put in its place. You don't want to create a void in the Bible even, there's a story of a man, I think, who had 7 demons, and Jesus removed them. And, oh shoot, I'm gumming up the story. The idea was that if he wasn't careful, he could have 70 demons instead. When you create a vacuum, something wants to rush in and fill it up. And so, for the man, I guess that would have been right living that needed to occur. But whenever I As a matter of fact, I generally don't go in and seek to find a belief and eliminate it. I generally find something that is a belief I choose to adopt, such as anything is possible. And I adopt that belief. And then what happens is everything in the subconscious that and the unconscious that goes against that will come to the fore and try to beat it down. If I'm self-observing, I will see that happen. And there will be illuminated for me with the flashlight of God, so to speak, the exact beliefs that are in my way. We're always working at cross purposes. We don't take into account the subconscious and the unconscious in our plans, for instance, to attract wealth. You can have all the conscious, goody ideas about it you want, but if you don't deal with what's in your subconscious, which is your old programming from when you were little and growing up, then, the left hand is working at odds with the right hand, and it just doesn't work out well. So let's adopt a bigger self-image and take into account that we're so much more than we think we are. Namaste. I welcome any kind of comments as long as they're respectful. There is no need to get ugly when expressing your opinion, and all opinions are welcome. Good day.